You're lying in a hut, shivering so hard your teeth are clicking together, even though the air around you is warm. An hour ago, you were sweating through your skin. Now you're freezing. Tomorrow, you'll feel almost fine, and in 2 days, it will happen all over again. This cycle has a name now. We call it malaria. But for most of human history, nobody knew what was causing it, why it came in waves, or why some people in the same village got it every few years and others never got sick at all. So how did our ancestors survive something that, even today, with modern medicine, still kills more than 600,000 people a year? The short answer is that most of them didn't. The long answer is that the ones who did survive changed what it means to be human on a genetic level in ways we're still uncovering. Malaria isn't caused by a virus or bacteria, it's caused by a parasite from a group called Plasmodium, and it doesn't infect you directly, it needs a mosquito to do that first. A female Anopheles mosquito bites an infected person, picks up the parasite in her blood meal, and carries it to the next person she bites. Inside a human body, the parasite heads straight for the liver, multiplies quietly for about a week without a single symptom, then bursts out and starts invading red blood cells by the millions. That invasion, and the immune system's violent reaction to it, is what causes the fever. And the reason the fever comes in cycles isn't random. It's timed to the parasite's reproduction schedule inside your blood, which is why the same person can feel almost fine one day and be shaking on the floor the next. This parasite is old. Genetic studies place the common ancestor of the deadliest human malaria parasite, Plasmodium falciparum, at tens of thousands of years old at minimum, likely predating the migration of modern humans out of Africa, which means malaria wasn't something our species picked up along the way. For a huge stretch of our evolutionary history, it was already there, waiting in every mosquito bite, before we ever left the continent where we evolved. In 2010, a genetic study on the mummified remains of Tutankhamun found DNA markers for Plasmodium falciparum, suggesting the pharaoh had been infected with malaria, possibly repeatedly in the years before his death, around 1324 BCE. Malaria DNA has since been detected in other ancient Egyptian remains as well. This wasn't a disease of poverty or the fringes. It reached the most protected, most powerful person in the entire kingdom, and it still got in. Ancient physicians noticed the pattern too, long before anyone knew why it happened. Hippocrates, writing in ancient Greece around the 4th century BCE, described fevers that recurred on precise cycles, some every day, some every third day, and linked them to living near stagnant water, close enough to the truth to be useful, wrong enough to leave the actual cause hidden for another 2,000 years. For most of that time, there was no real treatment, only survival or death. That changed indirectly on the other side of the world. Indigenous peoples in what is now Peru had long used the bark of the cinchona tree to treat fevers and shivering fits. In the 17th century, that knowledge reached European colonizers, who began exporting cinchona bark back to Europe, where it became one of the only effective treatments for malarial fever known anywhere on Earth. The active compound responsible, quinine, wouldn't be isolated and understood chemically until the 19th century, but its effects had already been keeping people alive for generations before anyone knew what was actually working, or why. So if a parasite this old, this widespread, and this deadly has been hunting humans since before we were fully human, how is anyone alive today? This is where the story stops being about the parasite and starts being about us. Because the humans who survived long enough to have children weren't just lucky. Many of them were carrying small, specific mutations in their blood, mutations that made their red blood cells slightly harder for the parasite to use. The most well-known is the sickle cell trait. People who carry one copy of the sickle cell gene have red blood cells that distort into a curved shape under certain conditions. Having two copies causes sickle cell disease, which is dangerous. But having just one copy does something strange. It makes it significantly harder for Plasmodium falciparum to complete its life cycle inside the blood. In regions where malaria has been present the longest, geneticists have found the sickle cell trait at strikingly high frequencies. Not because evolution favored the disease, but because it favored the protection that came packaged with it. Some researchers connect this pattern to something even more specific: the spread of agriculture. Clearing forest for farmland creates exactly the kind of standing water and sun-exposed pools that Anopheles mosquitoes thrive in, meaning malaria pressure in parts of Africa may have intensified significantly after farming took hold, not before it. Under that model, the sickle cell trait's rise wasn't just ancient background noise. It was a relatively fast, brutal response to a disease that farming itself had made dramatically worse. It isn't the only defense our species picked up. Thalassemia, another blood disorder, shows the same pattern in populations with a long history of malaria exposure. So does a genetic trait called Duffy negativity, which is now found in nearly the entire population of West and Central Africa, and which makes red blood cells almost completely invisible to Plasmodium vivax, a different malaria species. In some regions, Duffy negativity is present in over 95% of people, one of the strongest signals of natural selection ever documented in the human genome. Researchers estimate the mutation responsible may have swept through West African populations to near total saturation over a period that, in evolutionary terms, is almost shockingly fast. Evidence of just how lethal the selective pressure must have been. An entire population's blood chemistry, rewritten across thousands of generations by a single parasite carried on the wings of a mosquito. Geneticist Sarah Tishkoff, who has spent years studying African genetic diversity, has described malaria as one of the most powerful selective forces in recent human evolution, strong enough to leave fingerprints in our DNA that are still detectable tens of thousands of years later. Not because ancient humans understood parasites, immune systems, or genetics. They didn't need to. They just survived, or they didn't. And the ones who survived passed on blood that was very slightly better equipped for the next outbreak. None of this made malaria survivable in any comfortable sense. Even with these adaptations, mortality remained brutally high, especially in young children whose immune systems hadn't yet built up any resistance at all. In regions with the longest, deepest history of malaria exposure, it's estimated that the disease was, for most of human history, one of the leading causes of death before the age of 5. The genetic protections we're describing didn't stop malaria. They just shifted the odds, generation by generation, by a few percentage points at a time, in favor of whoever was left standing, and it's still happening. Today, malaria kills roughly 1 person every minute, the overwhelming majority of them children under 5. The vast majority in sub-Saharan Africa, the same regions where those ancient genetic defenses first emerged. The parasite hasn't gone anywhere. What's changed is that we finally understand what it is, how it moves, and why some blood resists it better than others. So the next time someone describes a fever that comes and goes in waves, hot, then freezing, then strangely fine, know that this pattern is not new. It's not even close to new. It's one of the oldest recorded conflicts our species has ever fought. One we didn't fight with weapons or fire, but with blood cells slowly, invisibly reshaping themselves across tens of thousands of years, one survivor at a time. You're still lying in that hut. The fever breaks. You're still alive. And somewhere in your blood, there might be a trace of the reason why.